Isn't it surprising that a book with an initial print run of, like, just 5,000 copies went on to reshape how millions interact?
Yeah.
It really makes you think about that fundamental human need for connection, you know? The stuff that How to Win Friends and Influence People tapped into.
It absolutely does. We often focus so much on hard skills, technical stuff.
Right.
But this ability to connect and influence, it's kind of the underlying current, you know?
Uh-huh.
It drives success almost everywhere. It's the human element that makes everything else really work.
Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're digging into Dale Carnegie's classic, How to Win Friends and Influence People. It was first published way back in 1937, but it's been updated recently and keeping it relevant. It's just full of these really practical, timeless techniques for building stronger relationships.
And for you, our listener, probably juggling a busy life, getting a handle on these principles isn't just about, like, being popular. It's a real advantage.
Yeah.
Whether you're leading a team or working on personal relationships or even just wanting smoother day-to-day interactions, these insights give you real leverage. And the fact that it's still so relevant after all these decades, it just shows how timeless these human dynamics really are.
So our mission today is pretty clear. Distill the core principles you can actually use right away. We want those key aha moments, you know, stuff that sticks without just overwhelming you with information. Okay, so let's start with what Carnegie called the foundational approach, the big secret of dealing with people.
Okay, so interestingly, Carnegie kicks things off by saying that criticism, it's basically a dead end. It just sparks defensiveness, right? And it rarely gets you the positive change you actually want. He uses the example of Two Gun Crowley.
Oh, yeah, the gangster.
Yeah, hardened criminal who, even when he was cornered by police, saw himself as, like, a good person deep down. A weary but kind heart, he wrote.
It's wild, isn't it? It shows that huge disconnect between how we see ourselves and how others might see our actions. Carnegie also brings up John Wanamaker, the department store guy. He apparently learned pretty early on that scolding employees just didn't work.
Counterproductive.
It makes you wonder how much energy we waste criticizing when, you know, everyone's just dealing with their own stuff. And that quote from Hans Selye about the dread of condemnation, it really hits home. We all want approval, not judgment.
And psychologically, it makes sense. Our brains are kind of wired to protect our self-esteem. So criticism, even if you mean well, feels like an attack.
Right. Triggers that fight or flight thing.
Exactly. Shuts down any chance of the message actually getting through. Think about that story of George B. Johnson, the safety coordinator. He tried forcing workers to wear hard hats.
How'd that go?
Badly. Resentment. And the second he turned his back, hats came off. Shows that just being the boss isn't enough to get people to really change.
Totally. It really makes you question how often we default to criticism, thinking it'll fix things, when it actually just digs the hole deeper. Carnegie then contrasts this with Abraham Lincoln's approach, how he evolved.
Yeah, it's fascinating. Even someone like Lincoln had to learn this. Early in his career, he was known for being pretty sharp, even sarcastic with his criticisms.
Made some enemies, right?
Definitely. Created lasting bad feelings. He realized that, you know, winning a verbal fight often cost him something more important, connection, influence.
And later, especially during the Civil War, his restraint was pretty amazing. Like, even when people were saying harsh things about the South or his own cabinet was getting heated, he'd often try to show empathy, suggesting, like, hey, if we were in their shoes, maybe we'd feel the same way, and refusing to publicly slam General Meade after Gettysburg, even though he thought Meade messed up.
Huge moment.
Yeah, it speaks volumes. He prioritized the bigger picture over, you know, venting his frustration.
What's really insightful about Lincoln is that he understood public condemnation is damaging, even if the criticism itself has merit.
Oh.
You know, Theodore Roosevelt apparently used to ask himself, what would Lincoln do when dealing with tough people situations?
Wow, that's a heck of an endorsement.
Yeah, right. And Benjamin Franklin, too. Admitted he was kind of tactless when he was young, but consciously worked on speaking well of others. He saw the power in it.
So this all boils down to Carnegie's first big principle, right?
Right.
Illustrated by that story about Bob Hoover, the test pilot, flew a plane with the wrong fuel by accident.
Oh, yeah. Crazy story.
Almost died. But his reaction to the mechanic who made the mistake, it wasn't anger.
No, it was understanding, even support. Like, to show you, I'm sure that you'll never do this again, I want you to service my F-51 tomorrow.
Powerful stuff. Shows how empathy can just diffuse things. So the principle is, don't criticize, condemn, or complain.
That anecdote really lands.
Yeah.
And that excerpt, Father Forgets, it's heartbreaking, but so relatable. The regret a parent feels after being harsh with their kid, realizing how those words stick, makes you think.
It really does. Our words have weight. Okay, so if we're not criticizing, how do we connect? Let's move on to how to make people like you. Carnegie gives 6 principles here. The first one sounds simple. Become genuinely interested in other people.
Yeah, it sounds basic, but how often do we really do it in our, self-focused world?
Sure.
What's interesting is that deep psychological need we all have to feel, like, significant. Carnegie mentioned that observation from a psychiatric hospital.
Oh, yeah.
That patients often found a sense of importance in their delusions that they maybe didn't get in real life. It just shows how much we crave validation attention. Showing genuine interest taps right into that.
And Charles Schwab, the steel guy, huge success. He said a big part of it was his ability to inspire people through appreciation. He actively avoided criticism.
Believed in praise.
Yeah, he said, if I like anything, I am hearty in my approbation and lavish in my praise. That's a powerful shift, right? Focusing on strengths, not faults.
Totally. And that appreciation, if it's sincere, it's like social currency. Think about Rockefeller praising his partner for saving some money on a bad investment.
Right, focusing on the 60% saved, not the 40% loss.
Exactly. Builds morale, encourages people to keep trying. It's strategic.
There's also that sad story about the wife just asking her husband for some positive feedback for a change instead of constant nitpicking. Shows how easy it is to focus on the negative. And even Alfred Lunt, the famous actor, admitted needing that nourishment for my self-esteem. It shows this need is pretty universal.
Oh, and Paul Harvey's story about the teacher seeing potential in young Stevie Morris.
Before he was Stevie Wonder.
Right. Shows how a little genuine interest can change a life.
But it has to be genuine. Emerson's quote, "You can never say anything but what you are," is spot on. People sniff out insincerity.
Yeah, you can't fake it.
It's about consciously shifting your focus outward, even for just a few moments. We all think about ourselves a lot, naturally. So directing some energy towards understanding others, it can be surprisingly powerful.
Okay, principle number 2 for making people like you. Deceptively simple. Smile.
Research actually backs this up. Professor McConnell at Michigan found that people who smile are often seen as more effective leaders, teachers, salespeople.
And they even tend to have happier kids. He said a smile conveys warmth, approachability, more positive info than a frown.
There's that great anecdote about the stockbroker. Changed his whole demeanor, started smiling more.
Yeah, William B. Steinhardt.
Right, and his income went up, his interactions got better, even his colleagues noticed he wasn't so grumpy anymore. And that little piece, the value of a smile at Christmas, it just captures how much that simple gesture can mean, especially when we're trying to connect.
It's a small investment, huge return,
right.
Costs nothing, builds goodwill, basic positive signal.
Okay, third principle.
Yeah.
Remember that a person's name is to that person the sweetest and most important sound in any language. We all kind of know this.
And it's neat. We act on it consistently.
Yeah.
It's fascinating, the deep psychological link we have to our names. Jim Farley.
The political guy.
Yeah, worked on Roosevelt's campaigns. His ability to remember names was legendary. It was a huge part of his success. He understood that remembering a name is like this powerful personal validation.
Yeah.
Makes people feel seen.
He actually had a system, didn't he? Linking names to details about people.
Family, job, hobbies.
Even Andrew Carnegie did this as a kid. Named his rabbits after neighborhood kids to get them to help feed them. Smart.
Yeah.
And think about Pullman's reaction when Carnegie suggested naming the merged company after him. That personal touch mattered.
And on the flip side, forgetting or messing up a name, it leaves a bad impression, even if you don't mean it to. That story about the bank manager in Paris getting offended by a typo in his name on a form letter
shows how personal it is.
Exactly. Even FDR, super busy guy, made a point of remembering names, mechanics working on his car, people he met briefly.
Napoleon III even had a trick, right? Asking for the name again if he didn't catch it, associating it.
Yeah, repetition, visualization. And that story about the GM employee and the cafeteria worker, her whole day changed just because the worker remembered and used her name.
It's like Emerson said, good manners are made of small sacrifices. Taking that extra second to learn and use a name, it counts.
Okay, fourth principle, be a good listener. Encourage others to talk about themselves. In our noisy world, giving someone your full attention, that feels like a rare gift sometimes.
What's funny is being a good listener can actually make you seem like a better conversationalist.
Totally counterintuitive, right?
Yeah. That story about the botanist at the dinner party, the person who mostly listened was seen as the most interesting guest.
It's because you're making the other person feel heard and valued. Charles W. Eliot, the Harvard president, said, "Exclusive attention is very important. Nothing else is so flattering." He was apparently a great listener himself.
Henry James described Eliot's listening as, like, active engagement. It really shows that being interested is often way more effective than trying to be interesting. Asking open questions, encouraging people to share. Powerful stuff.
Yeah, that department store nearly losing a big customer because a clerk just wouldn't listen.
Oh, right. The complaint.
Yeah. And contrast that with Mr. Detmer, patiently listening to that angry customer. Not only solved the problem, but actually strengthened the relationship.
Sigmund Freud, too. Master listener. People felt truly heard by him. Intense concentration.
Makes sense. Dr. Butler said, people who only talk about themselves are often, ironically, the least educated in human connection, no matter how much they know.
Good point. Okay, fifth principle. Talk in terms of the other person's interests. This means shifting focus away from our agenda to what matters to them.
And this simple shift can unlock doors. William Lyon Phelps telling that story about the lawyer.
Oh, the one who talked boats with him when he was a kid?
Yeah. Even though the lawyer didn't care about boats himself, he focused on young Phelps's interest. Made him agreeable, memorable.
And Edward Chalif trying to get funding for the Boy Scouts.
Took him 4 years.
Right. Failed until he focused the entire first meeting on the president's hobby, this historical society stuff, connected on that level first. Then the business discussion happened naturally.
Carnegie himself said the only way to influence people is talk about what they want. Harry Overstreet echoed that. First, arouse an eager want in the other person.
Makes sense. And the sixth and final principle for making people like you: make the other person feel important and do it sincerely. Not just flattery, but genuine acknowledgement.
Yeah, this taps into that fundamental need for significance again. Dewey called the desire to be important the deepest urge. William James said the craving to be appreciated is core to our being.
Ronald Rulland's story about Chris, the shy student, including him in that advanced class, making him feel valued, unlocked his potential.
Beautiful example.
And the woman who gave away her Packard car. She had money, but what she really wanted was genuine appreciation for her things, for her, that connection.
Deeply human.
George Eastman, the Kodak founder, meeting with James Adamson, spent ages talking about Eastman's charity work, genuinely praising it, turned a short meeting into a real connection.
And the restaurant manager, who kept Paulette from quitting just by sincerely appreciating her work.
Right. Disraeli nailed it. Talk to people about themselves and they will listen for hours. Makes them feel important.
Okay, so those are the 6 ways to make people like you. Now moving on to Carnegie's 12 ways to win people to your way of thinking. The very first one is pretty blunt. You can't win an argument.
Yeah, seems obvious, but we still try, don't we?
All the time. Arguments trigger that defensiveness. Carnegie tells about correcting someone on a Shakespeare quote at dinner.
Oh, yeah, and Frank Gammon pulled him aside.
Yeah, wisely said, "Why prove to a man he is wrong? Is that going to make him like you?" Avoid the acute angle. Let them save face. Even if you're technically right, you often lose goodwill.
Exactly. That story about Mr. Parsons and the tax inspector, logic and facts didn't work.
Nope, stubborn resistance.
Until Parsons shifted, tried to understand, find common ground, then things changed. And Harold Reinke, the car dealer...
The Dodge dealer.
Yeah. Found that admitting the dealership's mistakes up front, asking for the customer's view, it actually built loyalty, surprisingly. Diffused the anger.
Even big historical figures learned this. Horace Greeley, smart guy, apparently could never win an argument with Lincoln. And Ben Franklin consciously gave up direct contradiction, adopted a more humble, questioning style, found it way more persuasive. He actually had a rule: forbear all direct contradiction.
Smart. Okay, second principle flows from that. Show respect for the other person's opinions. Never say, "You're wrong."
Yeah, saying you're wrong is like waving a red flag, right? Instant defense mode. R.V. Crowley, the lumber salesman.
Right, he kept proving the inspectors wrong about the grade of lumber.
And technically won those arguments. But his company lost money because he created so much resentment that he started finding fault with everything.
Ouch. The story about the park policeman and the dog off leash.
Gentle approach worked.
Yeah, acknowledging the officer's point, admitting fault, got a much better outcome than arguing. And their engineer, who admitted his own mistake right away...
disarmed his boss.
Exactly. Self-criticism can be powerful. Even Rockefeller, dealing with striking minors, avoided saying, "You're wrong," Try to find common ground instead.
Third principle. If you are wrong, admit it quickly and emphatically. Surprisingly effective.
Yeah, that story about the employee who messed up big time. Went straight to the boss, admitted it fully.
Expected to get fired, probably.
Right. But instead, got understanding, respect, and they fixed the problem together. Owning your mistakes builds trust.
Okay, fourth principle. Begin in a friendly way. That old saying, right? A drop of honey catches more flies than a gallon of gall.
Totally. Robert Black at White Motor Company dealing with strikers. Instead of threats, he praised them for peaceful picketing. Bought them baseball gear.
Wow. Different approach.
Totally changed the tone. And the tenant trying to get his rent lowered? The friendly, appreciative approach worked way better than the confrontational tactics others used. Oh, and Dean Woodcock with the photographer.
At the utility pole repair.
Yeah. Calm, friendly explanation. Averted bad press. Just starting friendly makes a huge difference.
Fifth principle involves a bit of technique. Get the other person saying yes, yes, immediately. This is kind of like the Socratic method.
Right, asking questions that lead them to agree with small points first.
Professor Overstreet pointed out how hard it is psychologically to reverse a no. Once someone says no, their pride kicks in. They want to stick to it. Getting early agreement builds positive momentum.
Mm-hmm. That salesman who lost his voice.
Yeah, couldn't talk.
Just showed the samples, let the buyer examine them, nod along. Got a huge order just by getting those little yes responses.
Great example.
Yep.
And the wife getting her husband to agree to the vacation she wanted by framing it like he was the one suggesting the group needed a break. Smart, yes said.
Okay, sixth principle builds on listening. Let the other person do a great deal of the talking. People are usually way more interested in their own stuff anyway.
True that. The wife who found her husband suddenly more cooperative just by letting him talk about his day first.
Yeah, simple shift.
And Charles Cubelis acing that job interview by getting the interviewer to talk about his own achievement.
Made the interviewer feel good, feel heard.
Exactly. And Roy Bradley finding that the sales prospect basically sold himself on the job just by being allowed to talk himself up. Let them talk.
Principle 7. Let the other person feel that the idea is his or hers. People buy into ideas more if they feel they had a hand in creating them.
Ownership.
Yeah.
At Al Seltz, the sales manager, instead of setting quotas for his team.
He asked them what they thought they could achieve.
Yeah. Then held them to their own expectations. Created ownership. Boosted performance. And Eugene Wesson, the designer, failed for years trying to sell his sketches directly. Until he let the stylist feel like she was modifying and using the ideas. Made all the difference. Colonel House's strategy with President Wilson.
Oh, planting ideas subtly.
Exactly. Let Wilson think they were his own. Masterful influence.
Okay, eighth principle is huge. Try honestly to see things from the other person's point of view. Real empathy.
Carnegie gives that magic phrase, I don't blame you one iota for feeling as you do. If I were you, I would undoubtedly feel just as you do.
Why is that so effective?
It instantly validates their feelings, disarms them, shows you're trying to understand, not just argue. Thinking about someone like Al Capone. Understanding his background doesn't mean you condone his actions.
Right, but it helps you see why he might have seen the world the way he did.
Exactly. That anecdote about the angry letter about the Louisa May Alcott book error. The natural urge is to defend. Right.
Totally. We're not wrong.
But the wiser move was empathy. Understanding the writer's passion for Alcott, their potential frustration. Carnegie's advice. If you get an angry letter, put it aside. Draft a polite, understanding reply later.
Good advice. And the story of Chaliapin, the singer, and Hurok, his manager, understanding the singer's seemingly irrational feelings about his throat,
led to a solution. Yeah. Sympathy worked where logic failed.
Which leads right into Principle 9, which is basically a restatement. Be sympathetic with the other person's ideas and desires. Just keep that empathy front and center.
Reinforces the point. Principle 10. Appeal to the nobler motives. People generally want to see themselves as fair, honest, good.
Right, like even Jesse James saw himself Robin Hood-esque, robbing banks but helping the poor. We all have a narrative about ourselves.
Exactly. That detailed story about the car salesman dealing with a customer whose car kept breaking down.
Instead of arguing about the warranty,
he appealed to the customer's sense of fairness, their reputation for being reasonable, assumed positive intent. And it worked. Got the situation resolved amicably.
Principle 11, dramatize your ideas. Facts alone can be boring. Make it vivid.
Yeah, like the Philadelphia Evening Bulletin showing their massive readership, not with stats, but by publishing a single day's content as a huge book called One Day.
Memorable.
Totally. The old-time lover proposing on his knees. That's drama. Joe Fan Jr.'s train game for picking up toys makes the chore fun. And that cold cream salesman lining up 32 jars to show the competitor's ineffective ingredients.
Visual impact makes the point stick.
Exactly. And finally, the 12th principle for winning people over: throw down a challenge, especially when other methods aren't working. Taps into that competitive spirit.
Charles Schwab at the steel mill, seeing one shift wasn't producing much.
He just wrote the number of heats they did on the floor with chalk, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The night shift saw it, got competitive, and beat the number. Then the day shift saw that. Output soared. Simple challenge.
Were your in-laws Sing Sing prison? Implementing reforms by challenging the inmates to live up to a higher standard, trusting them more. It worked. Harvey Firestone believed in the power of the game itself. Competition motivates.
Okay, so that covers winning people to your way of thinking. Now the final section, leadership. How to change people without ticking them off. Principle 1 here echoes earlier themes. Begin with praise and honest appreciation.
Makes sense. Softens the ground before you offer any correction. McKinley praising that campaign speech before suggesting changes. Classic example. Makes the feedback easier to swallow.
Principle 2 is about subtlety. Call attention to people's mistakes indirectly. Don't put them on the spot.
Lincoln's letter to General Hooker after Chancellorsville. Masterful. Acknowledged Hooker's strengths first, then mentioned areas where he wasn't quite satisfied, rather than blasting his huge mistakes. Very tactful.
Yeah. And that little shift in language, saying and instead of but when giving feedback. Like, Johnny, we're proud of your improvement in algebra, and if you keep working hard in geometry, you'll improve there too.
Instead of but you need to work on geometry. That but negates the praise.
Exactly. Marge Jacob used that and approach with the messy construction workers, got them to clean up without making them defensive.
Third leadership principle. Talk about your own mistakes before criticizing the other person. Shows humility, builds rapport, makes them more open.
Sergeant Kaiser getting his recruits to get regulation haircuts. How'd he do it?
Got his own haircut super short first, led by example, shared the pain. And von Bülow, the German chancellor, almost criticizing Kaiser Wilhelm, but catching himself and praising the Kaiser instead. Smooth recovery.
Huh. And Clarence Serhusen telling his son about his own past struggles with smoking, way more effective than just lecturing him not to smoke.
Fourth principle. Ask questions instead of giving direct orders. Empowers people, makes them feel part of the solution.
Owen D. Young, the GE executive, his style was always asking questions. What do you think about this? Could we do it this way? Not just barking commands. People respond better to that.
Fifth principle is crucial. Let the other person save face. Don't humiliate them, even if they're wrong or being let go. Preserve their dignity.
That story about Steinmetz, the brilliant but sensitive engineer at GE, they needed to move him from a management role.
But instead of demoting him, they gave him a fancy new title, consulting engineer, and let him focus on what he did best. Let him save face.
Smart. And handling layoffs thoughtfully, explaining the situation, highlighting past contributions, it matters. Fred Clark's story about the VP and the production supervisor, letting the supervisor solve the problem himself after the VP pointed it out incorrectly, and the engineer who messed up the project specs. The boss took responsibility publicly, protected his team member.
Builds huge loyalty. Okay, principle 6. Praise the slightest improvement and praise every improvement. Be hearty in your approbation and lavish in your praise. Gessler's quote is perfect. Praise is like sunlight to the warm human spirit. We need it to grow.
Absolutely. That story about the young guy in London whose writing career basically started because one editor gave him some specific praise, it changed everything for him.
John Reynolds Ball, using constant praise with his kids for even small things, saw huge improvements in their behavior. Pete Roper, encouraging that struggling printer, focusing on the good parts of his work, turned his attitude around. And Georgette LeBlanc, transforming Marie the dishwasher just by showing belief in her.
Powerful stuff. Praise works.
7th principle. Give the other person a fine reputation to live up to. Set a positive expectation.
Like Bill Parker appealing to the food market manager's reputation as a careful listener to get his attention on a problem.
Yeah, frames it positively. Dr. Fitzhugh getting his charwoman to clean better by casually remarking how neat and clean the cup holder looked, implying she was responsible for that standard. And Mrs. Hopkins turning Tommy the bad boy around by telling the new teacher he was a natural leader.
Gave him something positive to live up to. Even my own experience learning bridge. Someone told me I seemed like a natural, had card sense.
Did you?
Probably not, but it made me want to live up to it. Made me enjoy learning more.
Exactly. 8th principle. Use encouragement. Make the fault seem easy to correct. Reduce the fear. built confidence.
Colonel House encouraging Brian for a political role, making it sound achievable.
Right.
And Dale Ferrier getting his son Jeff to help pick up pears by saying it was easy, just tossing them in the basket, framing it positively.
Makes the task less daunting. And the final leadership principle, number 9. Make the other person happy about doing the thing you suggest. Show them the benefit. Align it with their interests.
Right. Like getting someone to clean the stockroom. Don't just order them. Explain how a clean stockroom reflects well on the whole company and how their role is crucial to that positive image. Frame it so they feel good about doing it. Carnegie says even a small improvement here pays off big time.
Before we wrap, it's worth just touching on Lowell Thomas's intro in the original book, Shortcut to Distinction. It gives great context on Carnegie himself.
Yeah, it talks about his background, how popular his courses became.
Thomas stresses that people weren't just learning theory. They wanted practical skills for real-world business and life. Stories like Godfrey Meyer, the banker who went from terrified public speaker to confident councilman.
Transformative.
And the food manufacturer's boss learning to actually get his ideas across effectively. It shows what Carnegie's methods could do.
Carnegie's own journey, too. Struggling early on, then building this huge training empire based on hard-won experience. The goals of his course, self-confidence, better communication, positive attitude, still totally relevant today.
Absolutely.
So wrapping up this deep dive, couple of key takeaways maybe. First, that power of sincere appreciation. Just consciously look for the good in others and mention it.
Yeah. And second, don't underestimate remembering and using names. Tiny thing. Big impact.
Right. And third, maybe just watch out for getting sucked into arguments. You usually can't win them in a way that actually helps anything long term.
Which leads to a thought for everyone listening. Think about a conversation you have coming up. Could you consciously try just one of these principles? See what happens.
Or maybe which principle feels like the biggest stretch for you, the one that challenges your usual style the most. What could you gain by maybe, just maybe, experimenting with it?
Good questions.
Yeah.
And really, we've just scratched the surface today. If this sparks something, definitely check out the full book, How to Win Friends and Influence People. So much more in there.
For sure. It's a continuous journey, right? Improving how we connect with people. Hopefully, applying some of these ideas helps navigate that journey a bit better with more empathy, more skill.
And ultimately, more success, however you define it.